The alien princess demanded a human for her daughters. The Edict Part 1. The arrival. The massive ship came down from the sky on a bright Tuesday morning. It was unlike anything the people of Earth had ever seen. The ship was made of something that looked like crystal, and it caught the sunlight in ways that made it shine like a falling star. People across the world stopped what they were doing and looked up. Some felt wonder. Others felt fear. Everyone knew that this day would change everything. Commander Jack Morrison stood at the front of the welcoming group at a military base in Nevada. The desert heat was strong, but he kept his uniform neat and his face calm. He had read every report about the aliens called Valorians. They had conquered half the galaxy with their powerful technology and their cold efficiency. But the reports had not prepared him for what he was about to see. The ship landed without a sound. A ramp extended from its side, and figures began to walk down. At the front was a woman who stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, and her eyes burned with a deep violet color. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. Behind her walked 4 guards in armor that seemed to glow with inner light. Jack felt his breath catch in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that was almost frightening. The air around her seemed to grow heavy, as if her very presence was pressing down on everyone nearby. "I am Princess Alindra," she announced. Her voice carried across the entire area without any need for speakers or microphones. "I am the daughter of Emperor Varth, heir to the 7th throne of the Valorian Empire. I come bearing an edict from my father." Jack stepped forward and tried to keep his voice steady. "Welcome to Earth, Your Highness. I am Commander Morrison. We are honored by your visit." Alindra's violet eyes swept over him. She did not seem impressed. Her gaze moved across the gathered crowd of soldiers, scientists, and government officials. Then she pulled out a scroll made of material that seemed to glow from within. "The Valorian Empire has watched your species for 3 of your generations," she began. "You are curious creatures. You are fragile. You live short lives. You fight among yourselves constantly. And yet there is something in your blood, in your very being, that interests us greatly." Behind her, the air shimmered and a holographic image appeared. It showed 7 young Valorian women, each one beautiful beyond words. They all had features similar to Alindra, but each was unique in her own way. "My daughters," Alindra said. 7 in number. "Each one will require a human mate." The crowd began to murmur. People looked at each other with confusion and concern. Secretary of State Linda Peters pushed her way forward. She was a woman of 60 years with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she was not easily frightened. "Your Highness," Linda said, "I am not sure I understand what you are asking. You want us to provide husbands for your daughters?" "I am not asking," Alindra interrupted. Her voice grew harder, like steel being sharpened. "This is an edict. The Valorian Empire does not make requests. We make decrees." She paused and let her words sink in. Then her expression softened just slightly. "But do not misunderstand the nature of this arrangement. This is not slavery. The humans who are selected will live in luxury that you cannot imagine. They will be treated as honored partners to the future rulers of 7 star systems." Jack felt the weight of her gaze fall upon him. His instincts told him to stay quiet, but his duty demanded that he speak. "And what happens if we refuse?" he asked. Princess Alindra smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator who knows its prey has nowhere to run. "Commander Morrison," she said slowly, "the last species that refused an imperial edict no longer exists. Their sun was extinguished as a warning to others. An entire civilization erased from existence because they thought they could say no to the Empire." She let those words hang in the air. The silence that followed was complete. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. But I prefer diplomacy, Alindra continued. I prefer cooperation. You have 30 of your Earth days to present 7 suitable candidates. 7 men who are worthy of standing beside my daughters. Choose wisely. The future of your world depends on it. She turned and began walking back toward her ship. At the ramp, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. I will remain in orbit above your planet. My ships will watch and wait. I suggest you begin your selection process immediately. Do not waste time with arguments or debates. The edict has been given. How you respond to it will determine the fate of every human being on this world. The crystalline vessel lifted off without a sound and rose into the sky until it was just a bright point of light among the stars. Jack turned to Secretary Peters. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking despite his efforts to stay calm. What the hell just happened? He asked. Linda stared up at the sky where the ship had disappeared. Her face was grim. I think we just received a marriage proposal that we cannot refuse. The news spread across the world within hours. Television stations interrupted their regular programs. Social media exploded with fear and anger and confusion. Governments held emergency meetings. Religious leaders called for prayer. Some people rioted in the streets. Others locked themselves in their homes. But amid all the chaos, certain people began to think. They thought about what it would mean to be chosen. They thought about traveling to distant stars. They thought about the impossible becoming possible. And some of them began to wonder if this edict, this demand from an alien princess, might not be a curse, but an opportunity. The countdown had begun. 30 days to find 7 men. 30 days to decide the future of humanity. Jack Morrison looked up at the stars that night and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, he would do everything in his power to make sure that the men who were chosen would not be sacrifices. They would be ambassadors. They would be pioneers. And if luck was on their side, they might just become heroes. The fate of 2 worlds now rested on the choices that would be made in the days ahead. The alien princess demanded a human for her daughters. The Edict Part 2. The selection, the Pentagon's largest meeting room, had never been so crowded. Military leaders sat beside scientists. Politicians argued with diplomats. Everyone was talking at once, and the noise was almost unbearable. Fear filled the air like a thick fog. President Catherine Walsh stood at the head of the long table. She was a woman in her late 50s with gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice was strong when she spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make one thing very clear. We are not going to sacrifice 7 American citizens to please some alien empire. That is not who we are. General Marcus Cole, the highest-ranking military officer in the room, shook his head slowly. He pressed a button, and images appeared on the large screen behind him. They showed the Valorian ship from different angles, along with data that the scientists had gathered. Madam President, with all respect, we may not have a choice. Our best minds have been studying their ship for days. The technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of anything we have. One ship from their fleet could destroy every military base on Earth. We would have no way to fight back. So we just hand over 7 of our people like they are nothing? Senator Patricia Howard demanded. She was a young woman from Texas who had built her career on fighting for human rights. We treat them like cattle to be traded. Jack Morrison had been summoned to give his report on what he had seen during the landing. He raised his hand to speak. The princess said they would be treated as honored partners, not slaves. She also mentioned that there is something about human biology that interests them. A woman with gray hair and glasses stood up. Her name was Dr. Helen Grant, and she was the head of a government agency that studied alien biology. We have been analyzing the data that the Valorians shared with us, Helen said. Their species is incredibly advanced, but they have a problem. They have been keeping their bloodlines pure for too long. Their genes have become weak. They need new genetic material to make their children stronger. And they chose humans for this? The president asked. Human DNA is remarkably flexible. We can adapt to almost anything. Our genetic diversity is far greater than most species they have encountered in their travels across the galaxy. Helen paused and smiled slightly. From a scientific view, it is actually a compliment that they chose us. A compliment that comes with a threat of death, Catherine muttered. The debates continued for 3 more days. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to hide. A few suggested surrendering completely. In the end, the decision was made to create a volunteer program. They would ask for men who were willing to go, rather than forcing anyone. What happened next surprised everyone. Within a week of announcing the program, over 50,000 applications arrived from across the country. Some were soldiers seeking the ultimate mission. Some were scientists eager to learn about alien civilization. Some were young men with nothing to lose and dreams of adventure. Some were simply brave. Jack was put in charge of the selection process. He worked alongside Dr. Grant and teams of doctors, psychologists, and cultural experts. They set up a special facility outside Washington where they could interview and test the candidates. The work was exhausting. Jack slept only a few hours each night. He interviewed dozens of men every day, searching for the ones who might survive and thrive in an alien world. One candidate stood out from the very beginning. His name was Daniel Porter, a 28-year-old teacher from Ohio. He was not the strongest man who applied. He was not the smartest. But there was something special about him. He had a quiet confidence that could not be faked. He was curious about everything. And the psychologists said his emotional intelligence was higher than anyone they had ever tested. Why do you want to do this? Jack asked him during the interview. Daniel thought about the question for a long moment before answering. Because someone has to go. And I would rather it be someone who actually wants to understand them, not just someone who wants to survive them. You understand that you might never come back to Earth. I understand. You understand that you would be married to an alien princess, that you would have children who are half human and half Valorian? Daniel smiled. Commander, I was a teacher in a small town. I taught history to teenagers who did not want to learn. Now I have a chance to be part of history, to help write a new chapter in the story of humanity. How could I possibly say no to that? By the end of the 3rd week, the team had narrowed the pool to 50 final candidates. Each man underwent more tests than they could count. They learned everything that was known about Valorian customs. They studied the rigid hierarchy of the Empire. They learned about Valorian concepts of honor and duty. Then Princess Alindra returned to Earth. This time, she was not alone. 7 smaller ships descended alongside her crystalline vessel. From each ship emerged one of her daughters. The princesses were each beautiful in their own way, and each one radiated power and grace. The youngest was Princess Naira. She appeared to be about 20 years old by human standards. Her hair was like spun gold, and her eyes shifted between blue and green depending on the light. The eldest was Princess Valindra, who had her mother's silver skin and a proud bearing that made even brave men look away. Present your candidates. Alindra commanded. The 50 men were brought into a large hangar that had been converted into a meeting hall. Jack watched from the side as the Valorian women walked among the candidates, studying them like collectors examining rare treasures. Naira stopped in front of Daniel Porter. She tilted her head and looked at him with her color-shifting eyes. Daniel did not look away. He did not tremble. He simply looked back at her. This one, Naira said. He is not afraid of me. Daniel met her gaze steadily. Should I be afraid? Something changed in Naira's expression. It might have been surprise. It might have been interest. It might have been the beginning of respect. Perhaps not, she said softly. She turned to her mother. "I choose him." One by one, the other princesses made their choices. Kevin Shaw, a former soldier with calm eyes and steady hands. Christopher Lane, a scientist who had spent his life studying genetics. Brandon Cole, an engineer who could fix anything. Matthew Price, a doctor who had worked in war zones. Andrew Simmons, a diplomat who spoke 12 languages. Nicholas Torres, a pilot who had flown everything from helicopters to experimental aircraft. 7 men now stood apart from the others. Their old lives were over. Their new lives were about to begin. As the selection ceremony ended, Daniel felt Princess Naira watching him. He turned and caught her eye. For just a moment, something passed between them. It was not love, not yet. But it was possibility. It was potential. It was hope. The countdown was over. The chosen ones had been found. Now came the hard part. Now they had to say goodbye to everything they had ever known. The alien princess demanded a human for her daughters. The Edict Part 3. The departure, the month that followed the selection, was the strangest time of Daniel Porter's life. Every day was filled with training. He learned the Valorian language, which had sounds that human throats were never meant to make. He learned their customs, their greetings, their rules about respect and honor. He learned which topics were safe to discuss and which ones could get him killed. But the hardest part was not the training. The hardest part was saying goodbye. Daniel's mother lived in a small house in Cleveland, the same house where he had grown up. She was 62 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes. She had raised Daniel alone after his father died when Daniel was just 5 years old. She had worked 2 jobs to give him a good education. She had sacrificed everything for him. Now he was leaving her, possibly forever. On his last day on Earth, Daniel sat with his mother in her kitchen. The same kitchen where she had taught him to cook. The same kitchen where they had celebrated birthdays and holidays. The same kitchen where she had helped him with his homework and listened to his dreams. She reached across the table and held his face in her hands. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "You come back to me," she whispered. "You hear me, Daniel? Whatever happens out there among those stars, you find a way to come back." Daniel felt tears running down his own face. "I will, Mom. I promise. I know you will." She smiled through her tears. "You were always stubborn, just like your father." The departure ceremony was broadcast at every television and computer on Earth. Billions of people watched as the 7 chosen men walked across the landing field toward the waiting Valorian ships. Each man was accompanied by the princess who had chosen him. Daniel walked beside Naira. She was even more beautiful in the sunlight than she had been in the hangar. Her golden hair floated around her shoulders, as if gravity had less hold on her than on ordinary beings. "Are you frightened?" she asked him quietly. "Yes," Daniel admitted. "But I am also excited." "Is that strange?" Naira considered this. "No, I think that is very human." Commander Jack Morrison stood at attention as the 7 men boarded the transport ship. He raised his hand in a salute that none of them could see. "Good luck," he murmured to himself. "You are going to need it." The crystalline ship rose into the sky. Earth grew smaller and smaller in the windows until it was just a blue marble floating in the darkness. Then there was a flash of light, and Earth disappeared entirely. The journey to the Valorian homeworld took 3 weeks by human counting. The ship traveled faster than light, covering distances that would take ordinary vessels millions of years. But there were stops along the way, at space stations that orbited distant stars. At each station, the humans were put on display. Valorian nobles came from across the empire to see these strange creatures that their empress had demanded. They stared at Daniel and the others like they were exotic animals in a zoo. Some seemed curious. Others seemed disgusted. A few seemed impressed. Daniel used these stops to learn. He watched how the Valorians interacted with each other. He listened to their conversations. He studied their body language and their subtle expressions. He was gathering information, preparing himself for what lay ahead. He also spent more and more time with Princess Naira. She was different from what he had expected. She was quieter than her sisters, more thoughtful. She had a sharp sense of humor that caught Daniel off guard. And she seemed genuinely interested in learning about him. One evening, they stood together on an observation deck, looking out at a gas giant with swirling storms that were larger than Earth itself. "You are not what I imagined humans would be," Naira said. "What did you imagine?" "Simpler creatures, driven by basic instincts. Eating, fighting, breeding." She glanced at him sideways. "But you think deeply. You feel deeply. It is unexpected." Daniel smiled. "We are full of surprises, so I am beginning to learn." When they finally arrived at Valoria Prime, Daniel understood why the Empire had conquered half the galaxy. The planet was a masterpiece. Cities floated in the sky, defying gravity with technology that seemed like magic. Oceans glowed with light from creatures that lived in their depths. Forests of crystalline trees caught the wind and produced music that was hauntingly beautiful. Emperor Vareth received them in a throne room that was larger than any building Daniel had ever seen on Earth. The Emperor was ancient, his silver skin weathered by countless centuries. But his eyes were still sharp, still dangerous. He looked at each human in turn, studying them like a scientist examining specimens. "So these are the ones my daughter has chosen," Vareth said. His voice was deep and rumbled like distant thunder. "They seem fragile." Princess Alindra stepped forward. "They are stronger than they appear, Father. Humanity has survived disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. Ice ages, plagues, wars. Their resilience is precisely why we selected them." The Emperor grunted, not convinced. His gaze settled on Daniel. "You are the one my youngest granddaughter chose. Come forward." Daniel walked toward the throne. His heart was beating hard, but he kept his steps steady. He bowed the way he had been taught. "Tell me, human," Vareth said. "Do you understand what has been asked of you?" "I believe I do, Your Majesty. And you accept this willingly?" Daniel thought carefully before answering. He knew that his words could determine not just his own fate, but the fate of the other 6 men, and perhaps even the future relationship between Earth and the Empire. "I accept it hopefully, Your Majesty. I hope to be worthy of the honor. I hope to build something meaningful with Princess Naira, and I hope that this union between our peoples will lead to understanding rather than domination. I hope that together we can create something better than either of us could create alone." The throne room went completely silent. Everyone was staring at Daniel. Some faces showed shock. Others showed anger. A few showed something that might have been admiration. Emperor Vareth stared at Daniel for a very long time. Then he threw back his head and laughed. The sound shook the walls and echoed through the massive chamber. "Hope," the Emperor said when his laughter faded. "Such a human concept. You come to my world, surrounded by power you cannot comprehend, facing a future you cannot control, and you speak of hope." He leaned forward on his throne, his ancient eyes boring into Daniel's. "Very well, Daniel Porter of Earth. We shall see what your hope can accomplish. We shall see if humans are truly as remarkable as my daughter believes." Daniel bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As he walked back to stand with the others, Naira caught his eye. She smiled at him, and in that smile, Daniel saw something he had not expected to find so far from home. He saw the beginning of a connection, the first spark of a bond that might, with time and care, grow into something real. The journey was far from over. In many ways, it had just begun. But for the first time since leaving Earth, Daniel felt that he might actually belong here. He felt that he might actually have a chance. The alien princess demanded a human for her daughters. The Edict Part 4. The challenge 6 months passed on Valoria Prime. Daniel learned that being the partner of a princess was anything but simple. Every day brought new challenges. He had to master complicated rules of behavior at the royal court. He had to attend formal events where powerful nobles watched his every move. He had to navigate political conflicts that had been brewing for centuries. But Daniel was a quick learner. He had spent years teaching difficult teenagers, which had given him patience. He had grown up without a father, which had taught him to adapt. And he had something that many Valorians lacked. He had emotional intelligence. He could read people. He could understand what they wanted, what they feared, what motivated them. This skill made him valuable, but it also made him a target. Prince Torvax was Princess Alindra's younger brother. He was tall and handsome by Valorian standards, with platinum hair and cold gray eyes. He had opposed the edict from the very beginning. He believed that bringing humans into the royal bloodline was a mistake, a pollution of their pure heritage. He had argued against it in council meetings. He had tried to convince Emperor Vorath to change his mind. He had failed, and failure was something Torvax did not handle well. For 6 months, Torvax had watched the human consorts from a distance. He had looked for weaknesses, for mistakes, for any excuse to prove that he had been right all along. Now, at a state dinner attended by the most powerful nobles in the empire, he saw his opportunity. Daniel was standing with Naira when Torvax approached. The prince's silver robes caught the light as he moved, and his expression was cold as ice. "I challenge Daniel Porter to the right of vindication," Torvax announced loudly. His voice cut through all other conversation like a knife. The hall went completely silent. Every noble, every servant, every guard turned to stare. Naira's hand tightened on Daniel's arm so hard that it hurt. "What is the right of vindication?" Daniel asked her quietly. "A duel," Naira whispered. Her face had gone pale. "To the death." Torvax smiled, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "The human has one simple choice. If he refuses the challenge, he admits that he is unworthy to stand among us. He will be sent back to Earth in disgrace, and his marriage to my niece will be dissolved." The prince's smile widened. "If he accepts and loses, he dies. Either way, I win." Daniel felt the eyes of the entire court watching him. He thought of his mother back on Earth. He thought of the promise he had made to return to her. He thought of Naira, standing beside him with fear in her color-shifting eyes. Then he thought of the other 6 men who had come with him. If he showed cowardice now, it would affect them all. It would prove that humans were weak, that they did not belong here. He straightened his shoulders and looked directly into Torvax's cold gray eyes. "I accept." The duel was scheduled for 1 week later. Daniel had 7 days to prepare for a fight against an opponent who was faster, stronger, and had centuries more experience in combat. He threw himself into training with desperate energy. He barely slept. He barely ate. Every moment was spent in the practice arena, learning what he could. Kevin Shaw helped him. Kevin had been a Marine before joining the program, and he understood combat in ways that Daniel did not. "You cannot beat him in a straight fight," Kevin said bluntly. "He is faster than you. He is stronger than you. He has been training since before your grandparents were born. If you try to match him skill for skill, you will die." "Then what do I do?" Kevin smiled grimly. "You be human." "What does that mean?" "It means you remember what we are. Humans are the species that hunted mammoths with pointed sticks. We are the species that survived ice ages with nothing but fire and fur. We do not win by being the strongest. We win by being the most stubborn, the most adaptable, and the most willing to do whatever it takes to survive." The day of the duel arrived. The arena was a vast circular chamber with walls lined by thousands of spectators. Nobles had come from across the empire to witness this historic event. Emperor Vorath watched from a raised platform, his ancient face revealing nothing. Torvax entered first. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished silver. At his side hung a plasma blade that hummed with deadly energy. He looked magnificent and terrifying. Daniel entered wearing only a simple combat suit. He carried no weapon. By tradition, the person who was challenged had the right to choose the terms of combat. Daniel had thought about this carefully. "I choose hand-to-hand combat," he announced. "No weapons." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Torvax's confident smile flickered and faded. Without his plasma blade, his technological advantage was gone. The fight would come down to skill, strength, and will. "So be it," Torvax growled. The battle began. Torvax attacked with blinding speed. His fists moved so fast that Daniel could barely see them. A blow struck Daniel's ribs and sent him staggering. Another caught his shoulder. A third hit his face and filled his mouth with blood. Daniel went down. The crowd roared, but Daniel got back up. Torvax attacked again. More blows landed. Daniel's vision blurred. His body screamed with pain. He went down again. The crowd thought it was over, but Daniel got back up. The pattern continued for what felt like hours. Torvax would knock Daniel down, and Daniel would rise again. The prince grew frustrated. His attacks became wilder, less controlled. He was not used to opponents who refused to stay defeated. "Why do you not yield?" Torvax demanded. "You cannot win." Daniel spat blood onto the arena floor. "Because I am human, and humans do not give up." He thought of his mother working 2 jobs to raise him alone. He thought of his father, dying young but fighting to the end. He thought of all the humans throughout history who had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. Torvax charged again. But this time, he overextended. He put too much force into his strike and lost his balance for just a moment. Daniel saw the opening. He moved without thinking, driven by pure instinct. He swept Torvax's legs out from under him and followed him to the ground. His arms wrapped around the prince's neck in a chokehold, a technique that humans had used for thousands of years. "Yield," Daniel gasped. His arms were shaking. His body was broken and bleeding. "Yield and live." Torvax struggled. He tried to break free, but he was exhausted, his superior strength drained by the long fight. After what seemed like an eternity, his body went limp. "I yield," he whispered. The arena exploded with noise. Daniel released the prince and staggered to his feet. He was swaying, barely conscious. Across the chamber, he could see Naira weeping with relief. Emperor Vorath rose from his seat. The crowd fell silent. "Daniel, Porter of Earth," the emperor declared. "You have proven your worth today, not through strength alone, but through courage, endurance, and mercy. You could have killed my son. You chose to spare him. This is not weakness. This is wisdom." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried across the entire arena. "From this day forward, you shall be known as Daniel of House Valarth, with all the rights and privileges that title provides." Daniel bowed, though the movement nearly made him collapse. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As he was helped from the arena by Naira and his fellow humans, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. They had sent 7 men to be consorts. They were becoming something more. They were becoming family. And they had proven, once and for all, that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The alien princess demanded a human for her daughters. The Edict Part 5. The legacy 20 years had passed since the 7 humans first arrived on Valoria Prime. In that time, everything had changed. Daniel stood on the balcony of his quarters in the royal palace. Watching his twin daughters play in the garden below, Lyra and Maya were 12 years old. Their skin was a soft pearl gray, a color that fell somewhere between their mother's silver and their father's tan. They had inherited Nara's color-shifting eyes and Daniel's stubborn determination. They were, by all accounts, extraordinary. The children born from the unions between humans and Valorians were unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. They were stronger than pure Valorians. They were more adaptable than pure humans. They healed faster. They learned faster. And they had gifts that neither parent species had ever possessed. Lyra, Daniel's eldest daughter by just 3 minutes, could sense emotions in others. She knew when people were lying. She understood their fears and hopes without being told. Maya, her twin, had a mind that could solve problems that had puzzled Valorian scientists for centuries. The other human consorts had also flourished. Kevin Shaw had become a military advisor to the Empire. He had revolutionized Valorian combat tactics by introducing human guerrilla strategies that their enemies could not predict. Christopher Lane, who had been a geneticist on Earth, now led a research institute dedicated to studying the hybrid children. Brandon Cole had designed new ships that combined human creativity with Valorian technology. Matthew Price had established hospitals that saved countless lives. Andrew Simmons had negotiated treaties that brought peace to war-torn sectors. Nicholas Torres had trained a new generation of pilots. 7 men from Earth had become pillars of the Valorian Empire, but not everyone was happy about this change. Resistance movements had grown across the Empire. Factions called themselves the Purists. They believed that human blood was contaminating the Valorian legacy. They wanted to return to the old ways when the bloodlines were kept pure. Their attacks had grown bolder with each passing year. They had bombed hybrid schools. They had assassinated mixed couples. They had spread propaganda calling the hybrid children monsters. Emperor Varth, now ancient beyond counting, summoned Daniel to the throne room. The Emperor sat on his great throne, but he looked smaller than Daniel remembered. His silver skin had grown dull with age. His movements were slow and careful, but his eyes were still sharp, still dangerous. The Purists have made their final move, Varth said. His voice was weaker than it had once been. Our intelligence reports that they plan to assassinate my granddaughters. All 7 of them, along with their hybrid children. They believe that by eliminating the next generation, they can undo everything we have built. Daniel felt cold fury settle in his chest. When? Tomorrow night. During the Feast of Ascension, when all the royal families will be gathered in one place. Then we stopped them. What followed was the most coordinated operation in Valorian history. The 7 human consorts worked together with their Valorian wives and loyal military forces. They set a trap for the Purists. They allowed the attack to begin just far enough to expose all the conspirators. Then they struck back with overwhelming force. Daniel led the defense of the royal nursery personally. When the Purist assassins breached the doors, they expected to find helpless children and frightened servants. Instead, they found a father who had once defeated a Valorian prince in single combat and had only grown more dangerous in the 20 years since. The battle was brief but brutal. Daniel moved through the attackers like a storm, using techniques he had learned from Kevin and tricks he had invented himself. He was no longer the scared young teacher who had arrived on Valoria 2 decades ago. He was a warrior, a protector, a force of nature. When the fighting ended, the Purist leadership lay dead or captured. Their movement was shattered beyond repair. In the aftermath, Emperor Varth addressed the entire empire. His image was broadcast to every planet, every station, every ship under Valorian control. For thousands of years, we believed that our strength lay in our purity, the Emperor said. We were wrong. We were dying. Our bloodlines were growing weak. Our creativity was fading. We had conquered half the galaxy, but we had lost the ability to grow, to change, to become more than we were. He paused, and his ancient eyes seemed to look directly at Daniel. Then we found humanity, a species that should have been beneath our notice. Short-lived, weak, primitive by our standards. But within them burned something that we had lost: fire, passion, hope, the ability to face impossible odds and refuse to surrender. The Emperor rose slowly from his throne. The humans we brought into our family have not diminished us. They have renewed us. They have given us children who carry the best of both our peoples. And today, I announce that one of those children will be my heir. He turned to where Daniel and Naira stood with their daughters. Lyra of House Valorith will become Empress when I am gone. The galaxy held its breath. A hybrid child, half human and half Valorian, would one day rule the greatest empire in known space. Later that night, Daniel stood alone on his balcony, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, 17 light years away, was a small blue planet called Earth. His mother had passed 5 years ago, but Daniel had kept his promise. He had returned to see her one last time before the end. He had held her hand and told her stories about her granddaughters. He had thanked her for everything she had given him. Naira joined him on the balcony. She slipped her hand into his, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "You are thinking about her," Naira said. It was not a question. About her. About Earth. About how strange life is. Daniel smiled. "When your mother first came to our planet with her edict, we thought it was the end of everything. We thought we were being conquered. We thought we were losing our best people. And now? Now I know that it was not an ending. It was a beginning. The start of something neither of our species could have imagined." In the garden below, Lyra and Maya had stopped playing. They stood side by side, looking up at their parents on the balcony. Lyra raised her hand and waved. It was such a simple gesture, so purely human, that it made Daniel's heart ache with love. He waved back. "Mom always said that the best things in life come from unexpected places," Daniel said. She was right. The edict had demanded 7 humans. It had received 7 families. And from those families would come a legacy that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come. The Valorians had wanted human genes to strengthen their bloodlines. What they had gained was something far more valuable. They had gained partners. They had gained friends. They had gained family. And the humans who had left everything behind to answer an alien princess's demand had found something unexpected among the stars. They had found home. In the end, the greatest empires are not built through conquest alone. They are built through connection, through understanding, through the simple act of reaching across the void and taking another hand. Daniel looked up at the stars one last time, then turned and walked inside with his wife. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to build something better. But tonight, he was content. Tonight, he was exactly where he was meant to be.